In September of 2016, famed horror novelist Stephen King was murdered. No, this isn't some conspiracy theory regarding a King look-alike taking the author's place after his death, but still, don't be too worried if you don't remember hearing this shocking news. Because the murder of the man who gave us It, The Stand, and The Dark Tower, amongst so many other horror classics, was in fact simply the premise of a fictional book, titled, appropriately enough, The Murder of Stephen King. The book was set to be the latest installment of the James Patterson Bookshot series, a line of value-priced paperbacks, each around 150 pages or so, from the mind of best-selling author James Patterson. As is the case with his regular non-Bookshots titles, the majority of the bookshots were credited to both Patterson and a co-author. The Murder of Stephen King was no different, credited to Patterson and writer Derek Nikitas. The novella concerned a deranged King superfan who is stalking the legendary author, recreating scenes from King's most famous works as he attempts to take out his hero. In order to defeat this menace, King is forced to team up with a detective named James Patterson, and I'm sure any similarity between that name and James Patterson was just a coincidence. Just as I'm sure the creation of this book had nothing to do with the fact that the real-life King was a noted, outspoken critic of the real-life Patterson and his writing skills. Publicly, Patterson bore King no ill will for the man's comments about his work, and in fact said he was a fan of King, and hoped King would enjoy this book about his own attempted murder, which Patterson swore was a tribute. Still, if none of this sounds familiar to you, it's not surprising. Because, almost immediately after the book was announced in the fall of 2016, Patterson himself canceled its release, after several real-life stories of stalkers and King superfans disrupting the author's main home were brought to Patterson's attention. In a press release, Patterson insisted the book was a positive portrayal of a fictionalized version of King, but nevertheless said he did not want to cause King or his family any discomfort, and so he was removing The Murder of Stephen King from the Bookshots lineup. On Twitter, co-author Derek Nikitas wrote, "I'm disappointed, yes, but what's much more important to me is we do right by Stephen King." Why doing right by King never seemed to occur to either man while working on the book is certainly an excellent question to ponder, but will probably be left uninvestigated. Following the book's cancellation, the controversy was quickly forgotten. King himself never spoke of the matter, but certainly didn't allow it to stop his criticisms of Patterson's work. Just 1 year later, he would again mock Patterson, this time for publishing a new novel, The Black Book, co-authored, it should be said, with David Ellis, in which Patterson supplied his own praising cover blurb for himself, informing readers he thought this was his best book in 20 years. Publicly, Patterson would continue to shrug off these criticisms from King, calling King's labeling of him as a terrible writer hyperbole. And he also insisted that if King was to ever write a book called The Murder of James Patterson, he would definitely want to read it. Whether that's true or not, it's likely the cancellation of The Murder of Stephen King didn't bother Patterson too much. Including co-authored titles, he still managed to release 18 other books in 2016, including Taking the Titanic, the book which replaced The Murder of Stephen King in the Bookshot series and was co-written with Scott Slavin. And besides, Patterson probably had bigger things to worry about in 2016, as that same year, one of his most popular series was finally attempting to cross over to the big screen, and, well, let's just say it was having some difficulty doing so. The year is 2016, and the JP Entertainment Production Company and German mass media company Studio 71 are teaming up to launch the next big young adult lit adaptation fantasy adventure cinematic franchise with Maximum Ride.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, here to say that Stephen King and James Patterson could have easily squashed their beef right here. And that's by having King return for another coked-out directorial effort. Go from Maximum Overdrive to Maximum Ride.
What are your thoughts on Maximum Overdrive, Chris?
I like it. I like it.
I do too.
I remember even when we used to do pandemic watches, we all watched it together. Like it was like 3 years ago at this point, probably. And there's always that visual since I was really little of that race car in that dead dog's mouth. And that was scarring to me as a kid. But Maximum Overdrive is a coked out Stephen King, and it's insanity, and I enjoy it quite a bit.
It's pure cinema. It makes me sad that he never directed another movie. But then I think, well, wait, but would I want him to direct a movie after he got sober? I don't know, because maybe the magic was in the cocaine for that movie. But we're not talking about Maximum Overdrive today, unfortunately, because I don't think there's any sequels planned for that. But this one certainly were. We are looking at, well, we should say this is the second part of our summer surprise. Last time, the generator we use online, the randomizer, sent us a YA adaptation. And guess what? Because it hates us, the randomizer did it again and said, no, for the episode 2 of Summer Surprise, you guys are going back to the YA well with 2016's Maximum Ride. I'm sure everyone is screaming in excitement now because clearly this is a movie that the entire world knows exists. Chris, why don't you tell us? Obviously you don't have to, but just in case, tell the listeners a little something about Maximum Ride.
Yeah, for the one or two people that haven't heard of this movie before, it is directed by Jay Martin. He's most known for music videos, lots of Shawn Mendes films. I almost said music videos. It's written by Angelique Hanous and Jesse Spears. This is their first and only feature for both of them. It is based on a book series by James Patterson, famed James Patterson, over 200 books in his bibliography, I guess.
Yeah, one of the most successful, best-selling, prominent authors of the modern era.
Yes.
I definitely have some more to say about him.
For sure. This is one of many firsts that I'll get to later, but this is a first for Failure to Franchise. I could not find the budget info for this film anywhere. And for new listeners, off the top, I always give budget info and box office gross and stuff like that. Could not find it on the face of the internet. So there was no theatrical release to this movie. It was released direct to digital HD on August 30th, 2016. And I did find sales figures for the DVD, or sorry, not the DVD, the HD download. So it made roughly $154,000. So this might be, again, we don't know how much it was to make, but definitely brought on probably the least amount of sales out of any film that we've spoke about.
Well, you figure, so we always say a movie has to double its budget to be successful, right? To be profitable. Yeah. And you said that this maybe made $150,000. Having watched the movie, they might have doubled that budget, but not to get ahead of ourselves. But
They might have quadrupled it. They might have.
I will say, Box Office Mojo has a, and like you said, I know this never received like any kind of wide or big theatrical release. But Box Office Mojo does have a domestic gross listed for it, which means I'm guessing maybe they did like a couple, like it's playing at this one theater in like Tucson, Arizona, or something, to, like,
or even friends and family,
somewhat legitimize it. Yeah, because Box Office Mojo has, and Chris, just prepare to be blown away.
Okay.
A domestic and worldwide. It's just the same because apparently it didn't play in any other countries. But it's worldwide gross according to Box Office Mojo is $4,218.
Oh wow! Accounting for every penny.
So if we can add that on to the 150, suddenly it's not looking too bad, is it?
Wow.
Now the irony of this, of course, is as we mentioned, this movie is obviously a huge failure. Just like it made no impact, clearly. It just was a movie that barely, as we were just joking, barely exists. And the irony of that is, as we just said, that's actually kind of surprising because it is based on a book series by a very, very successful author. And just the prestige of his name and how high profile this series is and how high profile his works are in general. It is weird to me that this movie is what it is. I'm sure that is kind of baffling to you as well. Like that's to me, like even when I picked this movie initially for our original list of movies, like that's what I knew about it, and that's what has fascinated me about this. About why did James Patterson, arguably the biggest author in the world, why did one of his signature properties become this? So obviously that's going to be something we need to kind of discover and examine here.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to actually talk about the author himself first, and then I know Trev, you have a few things to say about this man.
Yeah, I can talk about like my thoughts on James Patterson because, as I'm sure some of our like longer like time listeners remember, I have a second job. You know, my main job is I'm a teacher, but my second job is I work in a bookstore. I've worked in retail big box bookstores for over 10 years now. I worked at Borders, and then when Borders went out of business, I've moved over to Barnes & Noble, where I still work. And so, like anybody who works in a bookstore, I'm obviously very familiar with James Patterson. You mentioned how this guy has over 200 books. And he is a juggernaut. He's a juggernaut in the publishing industry. He honestly comes out with, there's a James Patterson new release almost every month, if not multiple new releases a month.
Wow.
And you might think, wow, what a workhorse. Well, hold on, because there's a reason he can do that. And there's a reason he can get away with it. And that speaks into my thoughts on him in general. I'm just going to say it right now. I'll just come out with my general thought on James Patterson, and then I'll defend it. All right. James Patterson is a hack. I think what's good about James Patterson is he has used his clout and the fact that he is such a best-selling author to really fight for and advocate for bookstores and libraries at times when things would go digital or where things were primarily going digital, or, you know, when like book banning is going on or whatever. He always fights for like retailers and for bookstores and libraries. So I'll give him that. I'll at least give him that. But on the authorial front, I think he's a huge hack. There's a certain subsect of authors, you know, I think of other names like, you know, your John Grishams, your David Baldacci's, your Neil Flynn's. They're Michael Connelly's, who did Lincoln Lawyer and stuff like that. They're what I call dad authors.
Okay.
You know, they're the ones who, like, you know, 50 to 60-year-old dads come in to the bookstores and buy those books, or kids come in and say, what can I get my dad for Father's Day? And it's like, you'll probably be safe with one of these authors. They're just like, they're fluff, right? They're not, and that's fine, I guess, you know, but I'll turn into a snooty snob for a second here and say that when you work in a bookstore, it is.
You never
Never have been, no.
You're never snooty snob.
So if I can be pretentious for a moment, for a change, it is true that as a bookstore employee, I think a lot of us kind of look down on James Patterson a little bit because you're in a bookstore surrounded by all these like legit great literary works, and then people come in and like, can I get the new James Patterson? And you're like, oh. But I guess like what they're really saying is, can I get a book that I can just read in a weekend and not really activate my brain that much?
Sure.
But okay, that's one thing, right? And there's a lot of authors like that, and that's fine. But here's why I think James Patterson is like even like worse than that. And even though he's like the most successful and the worst example, the reason he can crank out so many books is that he just doesn't write most of them.
Yeah, I learned that too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and this is a known thing, right? So what James Patterson is most known for, like, you know, and I don't even know if you knew this, Chris, until doing the research. His biggest character is the Alex Cross character. Of course, there has been a movie franchise, although we will revisit that character one day on this podcast when we do the Alex Cross movie with Tyler Perry. But there were the two Morgan Freeman, Alex Cross, you know, ones. I believe there was an Alex Cross TV show, or there's about to be one. That's his most popular series. And as far as I'm aware, I think that's the only series today that he still writes entirely by himself. Every other James Patterson book that comes out is, I'm going to use the word co-written, but even that has an asterisk on it. Because what they do is the cover says James Patterson really big, and then on the bottom of the book on the bottom of the cover it says and then has another name, very small. And from my understanding, basically the way that James Patterson publishing empire works is, even though they want you to believe that they're co-written, like he just comes up with these ideas and sits down and co-writes with another author, I've basically heard through the grapevine, it's a fairly well-known, you know, not secret in the industry, he comes up with like a 2 or 3 sentence log line, hands it to those authors, and they write the book.
Right. And
why that's like really frustrating to me is like, that's like, whatever. You could say, okay, I guess James Patterson treats his empire as like he's more of a showrunner than the authorial voice himself. But what makes me really upset about it is that with a very precious few examples or, exceptions, I should say, most of these authors never get to go on to be big deals in their own right. You look at the book, and it says James Patterson and so-and-so. You flip the book over, it just has a picture of James Patterson. You open the dust jacket and you go to the author bio. It has a James Patterson bio. It doesn't even have a bio for the other author. They get like no credit other than their name being on the cover as the other author. And I think a couple of them have gone on to write their own things, but generally they're just kind of like meat for the grinder of his system. Yeah. And he's not like really putting them forward as the actual authors. So I think that sucks, and it just kind of speaks to his general laziness that he's putting his names on these things that he's not really having much to do with at all anymore. And so, he can crank out so many books because he's not doing them. And I don't even think he's that great of a writer in general. I've tried, when I was younger, I tried to read some James Patterson books. I think it's just kind of like, it's hacky writing, whatever. But the fact that he's made this empire off the backs of all these other people, and they don't really get to reap those benefits. I wonder what their paydays are even like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, my intro was joking about Stephen King and his rivalry, and it sounds like it's pretty outspoken. Stephen King just straight up calls him a terrible writer. Yeah. But he's really successful, right? He was on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert once, and flat out was like, James Patterson sucks. He only needs 12 hours to crank out 2 books. He's not scared to throw him under the bus. I mean, I guess James Patterson is so successful, so it's like water off a duck's back to him, So they kind of, Stephen King's take shots at him, and James Patterson's like, whatever, he's swimming in his piles of money. Mind you, so is Stephen King. And sometimes Stephen King is one to talk, but plus 200 works is a lot. That is quite insane to even think that that's possible. Yeah. And what you're telling me, it's because it's not possible. So
no, like King is very prolific as well, but I've never and I would say this is probably true of most people, I've never once for a moment doubted that he writes every single word of his,
Totally.
And that's because he will talk, and you've seen his interviews about what his writing process is like. He treats it as every day, Monday through Friday. I think it's like for him 8 a.m. till lunch, and then picks back up after an hour and writes till 5 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's telling you like what the work is. And if you think about that, you're like, oh, okay, it makes sense that he's that prolific. But that's like James Patterson is putting out way more books a year than King is, and that's because he, like I said, he's just not doing them himself. I think I will say though, I mentioned that Alex Cross is the only series that he is solely credited on. I do think the other books that he might actually have more of a hand in writing, but even this is like, again, goes to show how kind of like hacky and gimmicky he is, is in recent years, he started this new trend too of co-authoring with like big celebrities. He's co-written these 2 like mystery thrillers with Bill Clinton. So it's James Patterson and Bill Clinton, and they're like about like the president going missing and like people having to save the president. He's got one out now. It's James Patterson and Dolly Parton. I'm guessing on those, James Patterson probably does more of the work because I can't imagine Bill Clinton and Dolly Parton are the ones sitting down and writing it. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe he's just even handing that off to like one of his underlings and not even crediting them at all, saying like, sorry, normally I'd at least give you the small little typeface on the cover, but we got Dolly Parton on this,
Just so I'm clear, on this Maximum Ride series, which we'll talk about the book a little bit too, obviously, is he sole credited on this? Like, especially in the first one or so?
I think on the early ones he is, because I think that's before he really started to take off big time with the co-authors, but I could be wrong about that. And I know the series even still has some like more recent entries.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see if those were co-authored. I will say, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit for the history, I do know that the Maximum Ride series, which is a YA series, is his own reboot of a previous 2 novels he wrote. They were like adult novels.
Right.
And I think those adult novels he did write himself. So he wrote 2 novels like of this universe, and then I don't think those novels were as like successful as the other ones, or he just wanted to revisit the idea. So he entirely rebooted it as like a YA version. Okay. And one last thing I'll say about him, because it's relevant to our podcast, is I don't think I mentioned this in this episode. I should have, but now it doesn't matter because we can come back around to it. So like when you're very, very successful like James Patterson, you can, do a lot of, you get a lot of properties offered to you probably. You can, write a lot of things that other people can't. And a couple of years ago, I was very excited to hear that The Shadow was going to be revisited as a new series of novels. And I was like, oh man, The Shadow's coming back. I like The Shadow. I remember liking that movie. I'm totally down to read a new Shadow novel. Let me see here. Who's the author on this? James Patterson. No. So James Patterson actually has like the literary rights to The Shadow right now. He has rebooted The Shadow as a YA series.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, do I want to try and read this? And ultimately I didn't, because I read a number of reviews of it. And Chris, it sounds terrible.
Right.
It's about Lamont Cranston and Margot Lane, as we remember, the 2 main characters of The Shadow, who suddenly are both like knocked unconscious in like 1937. And then Lamont Cranston wakes up in the year 2087 in a futuristic dystopian world that is run by someone called the World President.
Oh my
and God. Lamont Cranston, I guess, according to the reviews I read, is basically like the sidekick in the book. He ends up teaming up with this young teenage girl who's the real hero. And Patterson even and again, it's Patterson and another writer who I'm sure did most of the work.
Yeah.
But Lamont Cranston even has like new powers in this one. He can like shoot fireballs apparently and stuff. I'm just like, what is this? Like, it just doesn't sound like The Shadow at all. So I just didn't even bother. But so that bums me out that a character I like is now in his hands as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was shaking my head through all that. That
Yeah.
that sounds awful. That sounds awful. Well, Maximum Ride, as you're saying, this novel was his first foray into the YA genre. And before I talk specifics about the book, I brought this up in a car ride a couple days ago to my girlfriend. And I was like, yeah, we got to record Maximum Ride in a couple days or whatever, on Monday or whatever. And she actually read the books. She read the first few of them. She was a fan of the first 3 books. I should say there's 15 total works, 11 primary books in the series.
Is that including the 2 like adult novels that started it, or?
That maybe 15 does include that. I'm not sure. I know 11 doesn't include those. 11, I'll just name them off right here. The movie's based on the first half of the first book, which is The Angel Experiment. Then there's School's Out Forever, Saving the World and Other Extreme Sports, The Final Warning, Max, a Maximum Ride novel, Fang, a Maximum Ride novel, Angel, a Maximum Ride novel, Nevermore, the final Maximum Ride adventure, and then we got 3 more: Maximum Ride, Maximum Ride Forever, Hawk, and City of the Dead. So those are the main ones in the series. But from my girlfriend, she was saying that people were a little bit, at least excited to see, James Patterson, his first foray into YA, like, well, how is that going to be like? So there's kind of like a sense of, I guess, his fans or just readers in general were at least interest was piqued, I would say.
Yeah, no, when I started working at Borders, this was already like this series had started a couple years before that, and it was already a popular series like in the YA world. Like this is a series I've always been aware of as books because we still get them in at the store today. They still sell. Like this is
really?
still
Wow.
it's like that kind of thing where it's kind of like how, Twilight and Hunger Games still sells. But it's also the thing of all those titles you just mentioned, the ones we still keep getting in are like the first 3. Like people keep still buying the first 3 because like they're like, I've never read. I'm looking for. I finished some other series. Maybe I'll start a new one. So I don't know if like people are going through and reading like all 15 of them, or just these first couple keep getting read, and people are like, well, that's okay, but I'm not sure I'm going to follow through all the way to the end, But
which is funny because that's exactly what happened with
the movie. Yeah. And I know it was also turned into like a very popular manga as well. So like during the whole big manga boom, there was like a really successful Maximum Ride manga. Yeah.
So just a couple of log lines about the books in general. They're the adventures of Maximum Ride, her name Max, and her
Yeah. Could you believe that the character's name is actually Maximum Ride?
Yeah, it's not great. And her family, with quotation fingers, called the Flock, which are six teenagers total, who are 98% human and 2% avian. They were kind of created in a lab. I didn't go over the details of what happens more in the books later on. I can only judge from the movie, which we'll get to. But that's kind of the logline, is that like, people, fantastical, I guess I would just say humans are experimented on in a lab that is called, what's the lab called? The lab's called The School. And then they're broken out in the beginning of the series, and then they have to find their way back because they're trying to find out who they are. Right. There's a little bit of maybe an X-Men vibe here. Yeah. Like young people with special powers. Right. So
young people with special powers, not just that, but like where it's like, they have the superpowers, so we get to all the superpowered action. But there's a lot of like the regular teenage drama too. They got hormones and they're new to this world. They've been locked up for this whole time. So yeah, you get like all the drama of being a teenager, but also they get to fly around with their angel wings. Yeah. Fight people.
And the 2 main characters I want to focus on, obviously I mentioned Max, which I'll give her a little bit more details here. She's Hispanic in the books. She has powers like breathing water, hearing a voice in her head that gives her advice. And then there's a second character, her love interest in the books, called Fang. His DNA is the key to immortality. He's very silent. He's mysterious. I know that's so strange in YA things that there's like a very mysterious, male counterpart to the female lead. He said facetiously. And they slowly fall in love in the series. Spoilers. That's basically the books. Yeah,
and I mean, to be fair, like I'm going to assume the books for what they are for this like YA world, to get to like 15 and still be fairly popular and successful, and to have the rabid fan base, which I know we're going to talk about, I'm going to guess they're probably, pretty effective and well done for what they are. And also, I will say, without having read them and just going off the logline and the movie we just watched and the general idea, I do get the like why kids would be intrigued and compelled by teenagers with wings that can fly, because that's like one of those powers we all wish we could have, and like just the idea of flight and being able to blast away from any situation and soar through the sky. That's pretty cool. And I'll also say, I don't know if you looked at this much, Chris, the covers for some of these books do look kind of cool. So they have kind of neat looking cover art with the kids with the wings. So it's like on a visual level, I know the visuals only apply to the covers, but yeah, I'm not surprised this series, got some momentum behind it.
Agreed. Well, the film momentum started in September 2007 with one of our favorite producers, Trev, Avi Arad. Is interested in making this film. Avi Arad is obviously famous for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, also almost destroying the Spider-Man films. But yeah, he was interested in making this, and then
I bet you dollars to donuts that while he was doing some of those meetings on Maximum Ride, he was wearing either a Spider-Man or X-Men baseball cap at the time.
Yes, absolutely. His outfit for everyday life.
Nobody, well, except for Kevin Smith, nobody loves to wear their own merch as much as Avi Arad. Those two guys.
Actually, Kevin Feige too. He's always wearing the hat of the movie that's in production.
Yeah, maybe did he get that? You know what? Did he get that from Avi Arad? Yeah, because he was like one of his underlings. He worked with Avi Arad. Yeah.
He must have. The film was slated for 2010. As we said, the movie came out in 2016, so there's a bit of history here. And Catherine Hardwicke, speaking of my facetious comment of an male love interest that's dark and mysterious, Catherine Hardwicke made Twilight. So she is signed to direct it, and then Don Payne, the writer, he wrote Super Ex-Girlfriend, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, was going to handle the script. Then we flash forward to January 2010, where it's about to go into production. Well, Hardwicke asks for the script to be rewritten. She wants more action. So they hire, we're talking about the MCU right now with Kevin Feige, they hire Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, who made Children of Men and Iron Man. So they're kind of some of the people that created the MCU. And then it's delayed some more. 2013 comes around, and Catherine Hardwicke has quit the film. And now at this point, the movie's kind of in shambles. So Patterson starts reaching out to people online. There's something like 9,000 plus Maximum Ride videos on YouTube. So again, yes. Trev's talking about the fan base. It's a rabid fan base. I know we were joking about nobody knowing about the movie, but yeah, people definitely know these books.
I know we're gonna talk about like this even more later with like some other online initiatives they tried. But just after I watched the movie, I was kind of like, well, I want to see if I can learn like a little bit more about this. And all it takes is heading over to YouTube, and still today you can find, I mean, obviously most of these videos are older now, but it's the evidence is still there showing how rabid this fan base was at the time of about 10 years ago or so, because so many people have made their own Maximum Ride, short films, little Maximum Ride web series, tribute videos, like those weird like book videos where they just show the book covers over some bad emo song from the time. I watched a movie. I call it a movie. I watched a YouTube video, which I thought was very, very funny, very entertaining. It's like a 9-minute adaptation of the first book where all the characters are played. Well, I mean, the whole thing is shot and directed and acted by a group of about 5 or 6, like clearly like preteen, like 11 to 12-year-old girls playing all the parts, including like the adult males and stuff.
Oh, that's
very funny. It's very, very charming. It's obviously terrible, but that's the charm of it.
Honey, it looks like your shoulder will be just fine, but there is something I can't really tell what it is. You see that square in your arm?
What is it?
I don't know if it's the same thing, but it looks an awful like what we put in expensive dogs in case they ever got stolen. They can be tracked down. It's like a GPS.
Oh no. Take it out.
I can't, honey. It's buried under tissue and tendons, and it was put in when you were so young. If I take it out, we may have to take off your entire arm.
and you can tell they like obviously really love these books, and just like the parents let them use their camcorder, and they're like, let's go out and do it. Some great moments in that. Some of the scenes in that I thought were even like I had just seen those same scenes in the legit movie we watched, so it was very funny to then see them played instead by these young girls. So,
that's great.
But yeah,
that's
like
great.
this clearly had fans who were rabid and like waiting for an adaptation. Like you said, there was like a bunch of fan made audition videos. People were like auditioning. James Patterson was speaking directly to the fans online. I know they were like asking them who should play Max. So it seems like this, again, seems like a recipe for success for sure, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's why they start to pivot. They start to pivot to making a web series. Yeah. The film is completely stalled at this point, right? In 2013 and 2014, and this what is the studio? Collective Digital Studio is attached with Patterson to make in the back half of 2015 to make a web series, and they reach out to YouTube personalities. They reach out to again all these like fans, and they're trying to get this show going on YouTube. Even one of the main guys from CDS says, the book has tons of fans online, tons of fan videos on YouTube, and I knew James Patterson was an entrepreneurial guy.
Yeah. And I want to shout out CDS because in doing that research as well, I noticed that it says that they've worked with other top, like you said, they primarily worked in the realm of YouTube and web series, and they worked with some of the other big like initial YouTube stars and personalities, including the Annoying Orange. Remember that? But more importantly for me, Fred Figglehorn. And I can't remember if you know this, Chris, but me and my other friends have seen all 3 of the Fred movies, and no lie, kind of enjoy them. I think Fred is legit kind of a funny character, and those movies are surprisingly, like, they're dumb, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I enjoy them in kind of the same way I enjoy like the Ernest movies. Like there's actually something just kind of bizarrely dumbly charming about them.
Sure.
But this is where I want to ask you a question, Chris. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, it's okay.
This is where I get a little confused in the research, because I feel like every bit of research I look at takes like suddenly a major leap here. Mm-hmm. Is it your understanding that this web series is what turned into this movie that we watched, or are these 2 separate things?
I think they're 2 separate things because CDS is not in the credits.
Okay, that's what I thought too. That's where I got confused.
Yeah, I think the web series was planned, and then because they're reaching out to YouTube, celebrities at this time, I got to bring her up finally. Our producer, our main producer on the film.
Not our producer. That'd be amazing if she was our producer.
We'd be a lot more successful.
we would be.
Okay. But Jenna Marbles is a producer on this film, and this is where I think we should really talk about her and talk about YouTube in general, trying to make the jump to cinema. YouTube right now is obviously, it's pretty unstoppable, truly. I mentioned my girlfriend before, and this is what she watches. She watches YouTube. And I've been liking it more and more for sure. YouTube Premium, you can suck it. You're trying so hard with your ads to get me to pay to not see this bullshit, but I'm holding strong. But Jenna Marbles, at this time, she doesn't do much anymore. She had 10 years of YouTube career, 20 million subscribers, 1.8 billion views. She made it with makeup tutorials, vlogs about, female empowerment, stuff like that, and a lot of comedy. And she quit YouTube because actually in 2020 she had to issue an apology video because of some accusations of blackface, racism, some offensive comments in her videos.
Seems to be the way a lot of YouTubers go.
Yes, and this is the problem with putting out all your stuff all the time, right? Like you kind of forget, and think about it though. Technology. This is a big conversation, but technology in general is so exponential, and like I remember. I graduated high school in 2006, and I remember that was the year YouTube was kind of coming out. Yep. And, to think from 2006 to 2023 in that short amount of time, because truly in the grand scheme of things, it's a blip, YouTube has become just a monstrosity. It's just something else. It's
in multiple ways.
Yes, in multiple ways, absolutely. And I think, Pandora's box was opened with that thing, and it was that easy to throw up content on there that you kind of forget, right? Yeah. And especially at that time, I think people did make mistakes. You know, to Jenna Marble's credit, her apology video was effective. It seemed, you know, actually heartfelt and doing, you know, when they say, I'm going to do the work, you know, they say that. But she did pull the plug on her channel, not pull the plug, but like, you know, go offline indefinitely. So, I mean, she kind of put her money where her mouth was, truly.
Well, the YouTube world is fascinating to me because I actually watch a lot more YouTube than you would expect a 42-year-old man to watch. Like, you know, like I said, like I think you were alluding to, there actually are... You
were just watching a bunch of videos of 12-year-olds playing the guitar and stuff. So, yeah,
my algorithm is screwed now. But no, like there are a lot of YouTube personalities I enjoy watching. But
Same.
But to like what you said, like we've talked before in here, how we both love Red Letter Media. You know, there are other channels I'm subscribed to, like the Try channel. I'm a big fan of like the Danny Gonzalez videos, and a lot of video essays. I watch tons of video essays online on YouTube, ContraPoints and stuff like that. But that world is fascinating to me because first you said the thing about how it's very easy to throw up stuff and forget about it. Also, especially back then, you know, I don't think this is like really calmed down as much, but I remember hearing about it more. In those early days of YouTube, when all these first YouTube stars were emerging, there was so much pressure to like not let a week go by without a video.
Yes.
So they're just like throwing up any idea they have. And I know that's something that actually became a mental strain on a lot of people I followed. And I've multiple YouTubers I've watched have like eventually left the game because of that, and have posted like final videos where they just say, I can't do this anymore. You know, this is taking over my life. It's not healthy anymore. I spend all my time either trying to think of new content, making new content, reading the comments on that content, and then having a breakdown because after all that work, everyone says I suck anyways.
Totally.
You know, like that. So that's like really brutal. Then, as we said too, there's the whole backslide of YouTube into some like real ugliness. You know, the YouTube was definitely suddenly there's like this kind of we were being probably a little bit too cavalier about it. But how many YouTube personalities seem to do this like slide into weird far right territory over time, and how there just seems to be like this like kind of echo chamber of that on YouTube. So yeah, there are. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you have the same thought I do, Chris. There have been a lot of days where I've thought to myself, oh man, if I could just go back in time, I totally would have started a YouTube channel back in 2006. Because there were people back then who were just doing videos where they were like, here's all the DVDs I bought this week, you know? And that's all they were doing. And I could have been doing that. And those people just stuck with it. And now, you know, they're like minor celebs getting to make their own movies and stuff. It's like, oh, I could have been that person.
Dude,
you know?
Between the years of 2006 and 2009, me and my friend were actually writing a YouTube series. And we wrote one that was like a 10-part episode. And then we started to film it, and then it just became too much for us to do because we had to cast people, and then obviously, you know, that's the hardest part is getting people to work for free. And then we had a whole thing planned to put it up, and we still kind of lament the times of like, what if that would have caught on? Like what would have happened? Because again, like there was a lot on there, but not now it's insane.
It's like insane now, and
it's insane.
And that's kind of my point. It's insane too, and it's also weird because, and I know like Red Letter Media is a great example of this. It's this weird thing where it's a huge industry. It's a huge cottage industry. Like to the point where now there's all these YouTubers that you'll see pop up in news stories. Like, who is that? I've never heard of that person. They just exist in like that, you know, microcosm of YouTube. But it also seems like all the YouTubers are at war with YouTube constantly.
Yes.
Like everyone hates being on that platform, but are too afraid to leave it because of the profit it can bring them. But YouTube is also making it even more and more hard for them to turn a profit, demonetizing people, putting stupid rules on them. So that's what I was about to say is, on one hand, I wish I had done that because honestly, based on some of the videos I've seen and some people have become successful, I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass here. I do think I probably could have had a shot at being as successful as some of these big YouTubers.
Yeah.
But also now I look at what they're going through and the cesspool and just mental health strain it's become, and maybe I'm okay with not having done that at the same time.
I also wanted to touch on just the idea that content doesn't necessarily equal cinematic.
Yes.
And we will be talking about the movie very shortly, but there's something that was going on around this time that used to drive me crazy, you know, in the 2010s was, okay, I loved Vine. Okay? I'm on record. Vine was ahead of its time. It was really interesting. It was really fun. It made people become inventive, and it was just a very, you know, when you put limitations on creatives, it really does help. you know? But what used to drive me crazy watching Vine is when you'd see directed by, cinematography by, and written by. And you're like, okay, cool it. You know, like, and I think some of these YouTubers who throw up a camera and do makeup tutorials and are funny or do have witty editing and do have great comments and this and that, that doesn't make you a filmmaker. You know, like the same way us talking about movies and dissecting them, guess what? We're not filmmakers either. And I'm sure if we made we sort of know what goes into making a movie in that sense. Like we understand the ins and outs. We understand what works and what doesn't. But I bet your ass, well, your ass, my ass, all of our asses, that we would make a movie that isn't great. You know what I mean? Like there's just another level of talent you need. Like I'm looking here, I wrote down 3 movies that some of these YouTubers have made. Shane Dawson made a movie Not Cool. I mean, just complete failure. Lily Pons, who came from Vine, made a movie called We Love You. Complete failure. And one of our faves, Trev, Logan Paul, you know, makes Airplane Mode in 2019. Complete, utter disaster. These people are personalities, but they're not filmmakers. And I think I understand why at this point in the history of Maximum Ride, it going to a web series and then looking to YouTube personalities and creators and content. I understand going to Jenna Marbles, you know, like that tracks. But, you know, Jenna Marbles is still just a person that does vlogs.
Yeah, it very much seems like they were like, well, this is a movie for the youth market. Who knows the youth market? Who can tap that youth market? Let's ask her a bunch of questions about the youth market, right? And apply that to the movie. But as you said, the problem is her knowledge of the youth market is just like, here's how you can make a YouTube video.
Exactly.
So I don't know that necessarily transfers to producing a feature film.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
There are some things in life that are out of our control. Why do you think you were created in the first place?
They're not human. The most dangerous mistake is to think of them as if they are.
They experimented on us like lab rats. And now we have to run and hide just to stay alive.
Everything was a lie. This is all part of some master plan.
So what do?
We fight. I almost lost you. And you're willing to risk everything.
They know we're here.
If we can't control them, they're expendable.
There's no way out, Max.
There's always a way out.
Our story surrounds 6 hybrid human children: Max, Fang, Iggy, Nudge, Gazzy, and Angel, who have all been infused with 2% avian DNA. Years ago, they escaped a lab known as The School with the help of their caretaker Jeb and have been living unsupervised in an isolated mountain retreat ever since. When school guards known as Erasers, infused with 2% wolf DNA, nab the youngest child Angel, the flock takes flight on a desperate mission to get her back and discover their true intention.
Pretty good. That's a pretty good plot synopsis, Chris.
Thank you.
I'm going to let you go first on this one. I know it was a first-time watch for both of us. I'm very curious to hear. I mean, I think I know, but I'm very curious to hear you verbalize how you felt about Maximum Ride.
So, okay, I went back and I looked at the list of our films, right? And I'm gonna sound highfalutin here. I'm gonna sound, big and about the movie. Let me just say, I think this is another failure to franchise first. Okay? And what I mean by that is, I think this is the first objectively bad movie on almost every level of the filmmaking language.
Chris, can I don't usually do this, but before you say the rest of your spiel, can I just tell you what I was going to say first in my spiel?
Sure.
Because it's so similar. Like, because my lead off was going to be this. I have this written down even. My lead off is going to be, we've watched so many different movies for the show. We've watched so many different types of movies. This is a first for us. I think this is the first one that is arguably not a movie.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So we're on the same page. And I knew it because listeners, I texted Trev about 2 hours before we started to record, and I go, "Can I go first?" Because I just needed to get out that this is objectively bad. This is barely a movie. It's not even, honestly, it feels like a horrible CW pilot episode.
As someone who watches CW shows, I take offense to that even.
Okay,
the CW wouldn't grace themselves with this.
Yeah. This is nothing exciting. It's cheap as fuck. Bad characters, unclear motivations, unclear threats, no explanations. There's nothing here. This is just nothing. It's not even worth a star on a rating. It's 0. It's a 0-star movie. This is what happens when you get a bunch of people that don't know how to make a movie.
Yeah, you know what? The 2 words that kept coming to mind while I watched this was tax shelter. This almost felt like one of those, right? Where people are just
totally.
we got this money to burn. We got to make some kind of movie. Let's just do Maximum Ride.
It's worse than a geezer teaser.
Yeah, it's like this. They're like, that's a property that can probably turn some kind of profit, right? And the most baffling thing to me at all on this is that like one of the production companies I noticed was like JP Entertainment, which I can only imagine is just James Patterson Entertainment.
Yeah.
And he's like listed as like one of the producers on this. So it's like, remember back in our Vampirella episode, near the end, we talked about how like this new company has got like the cinematic rights to Vampirella. And we talked about how we kind of feel like Dynamite Publishing, the company that owns her literary rights right now, kind of got swindled by them a little bit.
Yep.
This whole movie feels like that's what happened to James Patterson.
Yeah.
And like, look, I'm not a huge Patterson fan, so maybe you could say like couldn't happen to a better guy. But honestly, for someone to be like that successful, to be that big, for this book series to be that popular, and as I said, I gotta imagine the books are better than this. Mm-hmm. So I kind of almost do end up feeling bad for him because this clearly does not seem like what this property should have been. Like somehow he got bamboozled into the worst possible version of an adaptation of your work. Like this is embarrassing.
Yeah, I went through the motions telling my girlfriend about it just because she's familiar with the books, right? And by all accounts, it does hit where it needs to hit. Mm-hmm. Like plot wise and that sort of thing, it does go through the motions. But I did ask her, the books had a beginning though, right? And like drama and like characters. And she agreed. This movie forgets about all that. I mentioned the 2 main characters of the book, Max and Fang. Trev, I don't know if you clocked this, but the main character, her love interest or future love interest, best friend, second in command of the flock, his name is never spoken in this film. Mm-hmm. Not once. So when you're telling me that you're going to make this new cinematic franchise, based on these books, and you don't even have the ability to name the main character, I mean, it's unforgivable. It's absolutely unforgivable.
It was so strange because people really need to like at least go find clips to watch to see what we're talking about. Because again, you might think we're being hyperbolic. Mm-hmm. There were like a number of times during this movie when all I could think was, I'm not going to hold it against the cast. This is a young cast. They probably didn't know what it looked like, what they were filming. I don't know if they're being shown dailies. So maybe they thought they're making a real movie. But everyone else involved, as I watched this movie, I just kept thinking to myself, nobody really thought this was going to be like releasable, right? Like they couldn't have really believed this was like a legit movie they were making. Like imagine being in the editing room and putting this together. Who puts this together and goes, yeah, that looks ready for human consumption? Like I joked earlier about how the video I watched made by the young girls on YouTube was better. I stand by that because as cheesy, as corny as that was, that had a budget of maybe $10. The girl is wearing like silly, like wings made out of yarn behind her back, and every scene is filmed in their like mom's basement or outside on the lawn. But it had passion. You could tell they were having fun. Nobody here, again, it's hard to tell with the actors because I get the sense they were probably directed to be dour and depressing based on the material, but you can just tell there's no passion on like the filmmaking front.
Did you know that was there?
No, what is it?
I would say it looks like a tracking chip. Like the kind people put inside their pets.
Can you get it out?
It must have been put in when you were very little. Your muscles, nerves, even your blood vessels have grown completely around it. If I tried, I'm afraid you lose use of your hand.
There's nothing interesting being done with the camera. The editing is like very blah. The production design of this movie is horrible. The school is about as boring of a visual designed set as you can get. It sucks. It's like, this isn't good enough to be a web series. Not even forget a 2015 web series. This isn't good enough to be. What year did YouTube start? 2006. So let's say this isn't even good enough to be a 1978 web series before that even existed.
Yeah, like you said, ready for human consumption. A muted color palette. It's bland. It's ugly. You're talking about the production value and the sets, and it's like, when you mentioned Red Letter Media before, right?
Yeah.
And for listeners, they do a series on their channel called Best of the Worst, and it's where they watch 3 or 4, junk movies, B movies, D movies, just junk, and then they drink, and then they kind of talk about them, and then they award which one was the best out of the worst of them. And sometimes they comment on, oh, look, they're just filming in a warehouse with one hallway, and they're trying to sell that it's more than that, right? And this movie is that. This movie should be on a Best of the Worst episode. It's like, there's a scene near the end where they're back at the school and they're trying to escape and they're running around, and the editing and way too much unnecessary slow-mo, by the way. It is trying to pad the runtime, number one, but also hide the fact that there is like one room and one hallway that they got, and they have 30 minutes to film this chase scene, and it's trying to hide it, and it's so embarrassing is the word. It's just embarrassing. It's you sit back and, man, if I was Allie Marie Evans, who plays Max, I mean, I would go home being like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And again, you don't want to blame the cast, and I won't. I might blame the guy that plays the Wolf Boy, but none of these actors really go on to do much. There's a couple that just never act again. There's few, like the main character, that has a job here or there, but it's honestly, I don't want to say it like this, but it's nothing to write home about. It's nothing to even talk about. This is just a group of people that don't know how to make film. And it goes back to my, not theory, but just idea about getting YouTube creators or people like this to just come together and a mishmash of something. This was just the wrong property to do so. You can't take something as obviously, as Trev's saying, so successful and so popular as this book series and turn it into this. I'm shocked that this didn't destroy the brand, but also I guess maybe 7 people saw it anyways. So
yeah.
they burned all the copies.
Forget destroying the brand, yeah. Chris. If more than 7 people listen to this could have destroyed movies. There might never have been another feature film made after this.
Yeah.
And I did want to just quickly point out, just not to dispute something you said, but you said nobody in this went on to really do anything. I don't know if you noticed, the girl who plays Angel, she did go on to play Jennifer Connelly's daughter in Top Gun Maverick. So good for her. At least she got that moment. That's a little bit of redemption, I'd say.
And she was very good in that. Okay, I'll give her that.
Yeah, she's got the great moment where she sees Tom Cruise out the window. Very funny.
But now we got the word out on this movie, and she will not be returning.
No, not only that, but they're actually retroactively CGIing her out of all remaining Prince of Maverick. Yeah.
They're going to replace her with the girl that replaced Cassie Lang in Marvel. They're just going to get that girl now.
They're going to say they're going to replace her with Christopher Plummer.
Oh, yeah. This movie is, again, it's objectively bad. Like I knew when I watched this that I was like, there's no way that Trev doesn't think exactly the way I'm thinking. And sometimes we give trash some passes. Don't get me wrong, even on this podcast, but also in our personal lives.
Well, because there's fun. There's such thing as fun trash.
Yeah.
But this is so monotonous and so boring. And like the odd thing about that too is, even before I knew this, like the fact, okay, the movie ends on like kind of a bizarre, out of nowhere cliffhanger, and then you discover, well, this is just the first half of the first book. Now, first of all, talk about balls. Talk about hubris. You're talking about a series that by this point I think was, so you said, at least 8 books probably by the time this one happened or something. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we're going to make so many of these, we can split the first book into 2. Now, one of the worst trends of the YA movie adaptations, as we've mentioned before in previous episodes, was that suddenly, because Harry Potter did it, so suddenly there was this inclination of well, let's take the last book and split it, right? So Twilight did that, and Hunger Games did that. And I think in both of those cases, it was the wrong idea. You know, you end up with a fourth Twilight movie. Not that I'm saying Twilight is, to me, like hot shit anyways, but at least those other movies had like forward momentum. And I remember the fourth Twilight movie, the first part of that book is just basically watching them on like a honeymoon. It's like, why is this a movie? You know? And then Hunger Games, definitely, that's a franchise I like quite a bit, the movies, but I will never dispute that. I think that would still be like a super beloved trilogy today if they hadn't done the miscalculation of splitting that last one. Because that third movie is like kind of boring, you know? And then all the good stuff happens in the fourth one. So it's like, and that's like even like the climax, right? This series, they're like, let's take the first book, which is just setting up the world, and let's split it in two. And I just don't understand that, because we've seen the movie now. Everything that happens in this movie could have easily been condensed down into about 45 minutes, leaving room for the rest of the book.
Not just condense, but like add it on too. Like that's the thing, like condense it and add a little bit more, because, 15 minutes into this movie, I just wrote down, I'm lost. There's like a beginning missing to this. I said, okay, kids are in the house. All right. They're most likely off from the opening van scene. Okay. They're not allowed to leave. Okay. There's some tension amongst the group. All right. They keep talking about exposure. Some maybe have some superpowers, I think. But then I go, why? Who? What? I need clarity. I need depth. I don't know anything about this group. We've been thrown in, and not in a good way. It is just, it's all painful surface level bullshit.
The movie does that like shitty thing of just assuming that we as an audience will always be on these kids' sides because of their circumstances. Of just saying like, well, you're going to like this group and you're going to root for them because they're constantly talking about how they're being chased by someone. But that's not enough. Like, we do need personalities developed for each of them, and this movie makes the most minor of effort to do that. And you said the thing earlier about, or just said the thing about how some of them maybe have superpowers. There's no better example of how poorly made this movie is, and how incompetent it is, and how it's made by people who don't know what a movie is, than how it reveals the wings.
Oh god!
Because the prologue before the opening credits is the scene where they're like the doctor who was experimenting on them, but it was also kind of a father figure for them, Jeb. He rescues them, right? He breaks them out of the school. That's the prologue. So we see him collect these 6 kids, throw them in a car, and drive away from the school. And then you get to the opening credits, and then you cut to them after the opening credits. Then you catch back up with them years later as they're all teenagers now, and they're in this house. You get the sense they've been there for years, but a couple years ago, Jeb left, and he's never come back, and they don't know why. So they've been left to their own devices, the kids raising themselves, And then the Erasers show up, who are the Wolf Boys. And so then finally, about 10 or 15 minutes in, you get your first moment where Max, sprouts her wings. Her wings come out. And that moment is like so nonchalant. It's played like so low impact. And all I was thinking is, I don't know if maybe that's the first time the wings came out in the book, but when you make a movie, you're allowed to make changes. And Chris, because you just said, you and I at least know what makes a movie good to a certain degree.
Yeah.
In that prologue, wouldn't it have been awesome if when he was carrying like the young Max like out, there was a moment where suddenly as he's holding the young Max, wings like burst from her back, and it's like this incredible visual, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, why does this girl have wings?
Yeah.
Why wait on that so long? And then why have the first moment not be like a hero shot? Just be like, granted, hero shots are pretty tough in a movie where every flying scene looks like it was done in like Photoshop.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like clip art.
Yeah. But still, I just couldn't believe like how they even botched that. Like, that's your selling point. The selling point of this movie is we're going to get to see these kids fly, and the movie can't even handle that right.
No. And it's just, even on basic filmmaking language, in the sense of like, the plot, the youngest, Angel, gets kidnapped, right, by the Wolf Boys. So then Max and Fang go track her and get her back, right? And there's a moment where they get sidetracked because they take a break and they're in a city of somewhere, And we don't, again, and like the geography of the movie, you don't know where anybody's going, where anybody is, how long everything takes, because
which is ironic because this is one of those movies that does that stupid thing of every time they show a location, it also tells you what the latitude and longitude is for some reason.
In like the cheapest 24 TV show, cheap beep bop beep boop green text. Yeah. They're in the city, they take a break, and then basically the two of them, Max and Fang, hear somebody getting attacked, and then Angel's like, well, sorry, not Angel. Max is like, I gotta go save that girl. And then Fang, one of our heroes, is like, no, let her get viciously assaulted. Yeah. and then it's like prominently heard that she's getting like, you don't know what's going on.
You can like hear her being assaulted the entire time they're having this argument.
Yeah. And you're like, is she being like raped? Like, what's happening here? And you're like, yeah, let Max go save this person. Like, you presumably have superpowers and you can fly. Go do this. But Fang, no, we can't do that. We can't get sidetracked. Anyway, obviously Max goes and gets it done, fights off the guy, gets shot, and it's nice that the person that was saved, her mother, is a veterinarian. And it cuts to her waking up in a bedroom at this house of the veterinarian and the young girl that Max saved. And let me remind you that we are in a race against time to save their friend. Max wakes up, just kind of yawns, she just got out of bed from a long nap, and she looks around and she goes downstairs, and like the little girl and the mom are like, hey, do you want some breakfast? And she's like, yeah, sure. And then I'm sitting there being like, wait a second, why are they all just chilling and just like having a good day? They have to go get Angel. Like, why are we pressing pause to have pancakes?
Pancakes!
No pancakes.
Pancakes!
No pancakes!
And it's really, because I apparently that does happen in the book, but maybe the book is bad too, and we're giving it too much credit as well. But there's just like something basic here that you've created a ticking clock, a narrative that we got to go get this girl, and then our heroes don't want to save anybody, and then when they do save somebody, they're gonna chill and hang out like it's no big deal.
Well, it's strange because, and again, we haven't read the books, so if we're wrong about this, and if this is the case, then feel free, if you're a Maximum Ride super fan, to reach out about this. But my thought was, I will say, first of all, that scene was one of the only scenes that got like an actual reaction for me, and just that I was like, well, those pancakes look pretty good, So I suddenly was hungry for pancakes.
Nice.
But like you'd say this thing about like pause in the movie, my assumption would have been, oh, all right, well, I know these tropes. This isn't pausing the movie. What this is doing is this girl that she saved and her mom, the vet who takes care of Max, are going to become two new protagonists. Mm-hmm. They're going to join our group because you should have like some human characters with them to help the audience, right? Because all of the main characters in this have lived their entire lives in this world. So if we have human characters that are along for the ride, the Maximum Ride, along with them, it would be helpful for us. And then you can have a whole like subplot about Max has never had a human friend and now she does. You also have like the mom character who can be like this new parental figure for them. Oh no, those characters are gone after that scene.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like those characters end up being prominent in the rest of the books or anything, but you're right. It sticks out like a sore thumb here because they don't stick around. So that was very confusing to me.
Yeah, like even you could have done like fish out of water stuff. You could have added some humor. You could have allowed the audience to learn more about their world and their social situation with the six people, like the six teenagers. It just drops it completely.
Yeah, that's weird because like we're told they spent their entire childhood in the school. Jeb broke them out, and they've spent their entire life since then in a house in the mountains. He never let them leave, and even after he left, Max has like kept that rule and said we can't leave. Mm-hmm. And then the first times we ever see any of them go into like the city or the town, they don't play that fish out of water thing. They walk around and they're kind of like, yeah, they look around a little bit. They go into a store, but like they're never so blown away by anything. They don't go for the easy comedy of them being like, well, I don't know what's an ATM or so. It's like they don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, again, barely passable, right? Can we talk about this Ari, this wolf boy?
I think we have to.
Okay. So Ari is played by Luke. Let's give the credit where credit's due. Okay. Luke Gregory Crosby plays Ari, this wolf boy that kidnaps Angel and sounds like is Max's main antagonist. I don't know about in the books or how long in the books, but it's revealed that he is Jeb's kid, maybe biologically, maybe just raised, who knows. And he's grown up in the school as well, but almost jealous or fearful of these lab-created creatures. And he's just a little shit as a kid. And basically Max, when they were little, Max got in a fight with them and like scratched his face or whatever. And then Ari becomes one of these erasers. And in this world, erasers they take 2% wolf DNA. And the entire time, Luke Gregory Crosby is just doing that whole B-movie wolf thing of just keeping his mouth open and going like,
yeah.
The whole time.
Well, you can like part of that is definitely that he probably realized he cannot close his mouth with those fake teeth.
Yes, exactly. And it is painful. It's painful, and I'm sorry, Luke, but he's not great. He went on to do a few things. He still is a working actor. I hope he's gotten better.
Well, did you notice? I'm worried this movie typecast him because the very next thing he did after this was he did a short film called The Huntress versus the Wolf, in which he plays the wolf.
That was an agent move for sure. Yeah, he's bad, and when I mean bad, this movie is a negative of a movie. But if he's going to be your main antagonist, and all I'm waiting to see him every single time is just kind of breathing heavily and hissing, there's just nothing. There's no there. You know?
He's bad. You know who else is bad? And look, we don't like to shit on actors. We try to avoid that,
Nope,
especially very young actors. But the kid who plays young Ari, also atrocious. I know that's mean. I know that kid's like 9 or 10, but it's very, very bad.
Does it bother you? I can't figure it out. Why Dad likes you so much? Because there's nothing special about you. You're just a bunch of chemicals somebody cooked up in a lab. If you wanted to, you can make 100 of you. The truth is, you're a mistake. An experiment gone wrong. You're not even human. How does it feel to be a monster? Things would be so much better if you would just go away. Would you like that?
Yes. What did he do? Let's see. His name, I'm going to name him. Xander Faden. What did he go do? After that, he did 4 episodes of a show and then 1 episode of another show, and he's done now. So
maybe that's fine. Maybe it's like one of those things where his parents, like, you know, told him you're an actor, and he's like, I guess, I don't know, and like forced him into this. But
hold on, he was the photo double for Bryant Prince on The Lone Ranger, a film we will be looking at one day. So,
well, how exciting!
Hey, dude, I'm reaching for anything here. Okay, I'm reaching for anything. You mentioned the end of this film where it just kind of ends. Mm-hmm. Did you like how Max has a seizure? Okay, on a hilltop. So obviously, spoilers. They break out and they're on to the next adventure. They got to go to New York City, but Max has a seizure, and then she has like these flashes in her head, obviously, while she's passed out or whatever. And it cuts to her waking up, and her friends, instead of like trying to resolve her situation or get her medical attention or anything, one's like gathering firewood. There's no panic to help her at all. She just wakes up.
They have the ability to fly her to a hospital.
Yeah, and she just kind of wakes up, and then she's fine. Everything's fine. And the movie ends.
There's a lot of little things like that where the movie, like, I don't want to call this, because again, we talked about the idea of like fun schlock or fun trash.
Yeah.
And I certainly wish this movie got closer to that more often. But as you just said, there were so many things where I was just trying to like entertain myself by trying to almost force those kind of moments. But or just like think about the moments that truly do make no sense. At the very beginning, not the very beginning, but after the prologue and opening credits, when you first see Max as a teenage girl wake up in the house, she gets up out of bed and she walks over to her dresser and she like carves into the dresser, like the way like in old prison movies, people would mark off how many days they've been in prison on the wall with like the slashes, 4 slashes, then a 5th one across. So we see her mark that. And the first thing I thought was obviously like, do calendars not exist in this world? Buy a calendar, But also like if you just look at the dresser, there's like not that many slashes on it. So then I was like, what is she marking? That can't be every day. Is that, or does she get a new dresser every month? And that's just like her actual calendar for the month. She's like, oh no, sorry, end of the month, I gotta go get a new dresser. And then the other thing that I was allowing myself to be entertained by throughout the movie is that at a certain point, Max gets a change of clothes. The girl who she saves from the assault, because she's shot and her clothes are all bloody, the girl gives her some new clothes to wear, including a Rancid shirt, the band Rancid. But all the characters, because they have wings, they have to cut the sides off their shirts, so they're sleeveless shirts. And she cuts that shirt in such a way that from the rest of the movie, every time you see her just full on, instead of saying it obviously it says Rancid, but because of the way she cuts it, it looks like it says Ranch. I'm just she's got she just loves ranch dressing, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bad day for night shots, and for listeners who don't understand what that means, it's just a lot of low budget B movie stuff. To shoot at night is very, very difficult, and what they'll do is they'll shoot in really harsh sunlight, and then put like a blue filter on it.
Yeah.
And you can really tell when it's day for night because there's a lot of harsh shadows and everybody's squinting. There's a lot of that.
Just to be fair, though, that's clearly because they saved all their budget for the amazing shot where the house explodes and they fly out of the explosion.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Yeah, listeners, this is a first. This is really we have. I cannot believe we've been able to talk this long on a non-movie.
No, I'm not kidding. This really feels like the first one where, I mean, we've watched some bad movies, but this is the first one where I feel like it's almost like we shouldn't even be doing this. It's like...
Yeah, I almost texted you and called an audible, honestly. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. I think I crafted even like a text to be like, what are we going to talk about? Mm-hmm. Like, we can't even talk about character arcs. We can't talk about any true humor. We can't be like, well, at least they had that fun shot, or like, at least they had that cool score. Like, we can't even do a score whore. Like, this is just such a nothing anything. On a technical level, it's inept.
Yeah.
It's just inept.
Well, that's why I asked. Like, that's what confused me about. Like, I was like, was this originally meant to be like the web series turned into a movie? Because I've seen examples of that. Like, the 5th Phantasm movie was initially made as a Phantasm web series and then kind of expanded on and made into a movie. And when you watch it, you can tell. Like, it's like, it doesn't feel like the rest of the Phantasm movies. It feels very cheap. I still like it for, the story, but on a technical level, you're kind of like, oh, this looks like a YouTube thing,
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got confused because honestly, this looks worse than like a lot of web series I've seen. Like this is on like, you think of like that Mortal Kombat web series from a while back and like the production value that had compared to this, and just like, what happened here? And that's why I said, like, I'm not like the tax shelter thing, kind of a joke, but not really. This really just feels like this was like a quick way to cash in on something and nobody really put much effort into it. And I just can't imagine, as I said, when this is all put together and assembled, there's no way anyone really thought at the end of the day this was going to launch a major franchise because this is just barely a product. You and I bristle at the word content instead of movies or TV, but this is content. This is just something that was made and like put out into the world barely.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a travesty. Like it's bad. It's maximum bad.
And I think what does make it interesting is like whatever. Again, I'm not a huge James Patterson fan, but based on just how big that fan base is and how successful I know the series is, that the IP did not deserve this. Nothing deserves this, but nothing that initially successful in its source material deserves something this bad and this cheap and this poorly designed.
Well, that's where I want to ask you, I guess. I'm kind of done talking about the movie itself, but you are a big X-Men guy. Mm-hmm. You actually host a podcast, Days of Future podcast, all about X-Men. And This has glimmers of that. It has a little bit there, like, like seeds of something that could be cool, could be interesting if you broaden the world the right way, and perhaps the books did. On that level, do you see something here? Like, maybe even just from our discussion on it, do you see somewhere that this could be something?
On just a general, like, concept level, sure. I'm not opposed to a story of, winged kids breaking out of a government installation and going on the run. That
Sure.
could be good. So, I mean, in terms of the movie that I watched, no. There's nothing here seems very salvageable on a technical level or on a content level based on how they tell it. But the pure concept seems like, it's not like watching this made me want to race out and read the books, but the pure concept seems like there's like potential there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it just drops the ball and everything. Another great example that I know we are pretty much done with the movie, but I guess the last thing we could talk about is because it's one of the things where, like, they maybe thought this is one of the actual exciting moments of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is like the twist, which, by the way, not a twist. You'll predict it very early on.
Yeah.
But so, as I said, there's this doctor who worked with them at the school when they're young named Jeb, but apparently he grows a conscience and breaks them out, takes them to this house, hides them. And then, a few years later, he goes out for groceries and never comes back. And so they're like, we don't know what happened to Jeb. And Max this whole time has been, she's the only one that has faith. Jeb's going to come back. We just have to stay here and wait for Jeb. And the other kid's like, no, they probably caught him. They probably killed him. And then they keep cutting back to the school and seeing, this mysterious doctor who we only see from behind ordering the erasers around and telling them we need to get the kids back. If you have 3 brain cells, you will probably immediately go, I bet that's Jeb. Mm-hmm, and sure enough, it turns out to be Jeb. And then this is where the movie starts to get like, and again, this is why I think it's a miscalculation to only do the first half of the book, because it gets overly convoluted and unnecessarily stupid here. Because once they recapture them, the movie tries to do like a double blind twist on us where
right.
Max is like so shocked and disappointed to find out that Jeb actually, was evil and caught them. But then the movie insinuates that maybe he's not evil and maybe he's being forced to do this because he passes her like a secret note, but we don't get any like resolution to that. We don't get the answers. And it's just like, and I honestly just didn't care. And that's when a movie's not working, where I'm like, you just like revealed that their hero was actually a villain, but maybe he's actually still a hero. And like none of that is compelling to me on any level. I'm just like, okay, whatever. I just don't care.
That's fine. I completely forgot. Also, there's like a cut to a faceless voice that might be actually running things.
Yeah.
And even at the end there where it seemed to maybe even reveal who that person was, it just doesn't.
It's funny is like whenever I see that, whenever they do that like faceless voice thing in a movie, it's the Moriarty and the first Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes effect, where you're like, oh, just do a voice because then we'll get a big actor for the next one.
Totally.
And it's like, what were they? You're not going to get no big actor for Maximum Ride 2. You should have just shown whatever day player you had do that voice, because that's probably who would have played the part.
Yeah. This one was a whimper. This one was rough. This was rough. This was, it's like 100 or what is it? It's an hour and 20 minutes or so. And even that was too long. It was.
That said, better than Love Guru.
Oh, get out of here!
Get
out of here! At least no. Take that back.
No, I won't take it back, because Love Guru had a budget and talented people. This movie,
it had that little office for Mini-Me, and that was funny. Okay, and also Vern Troyer took that home for his own house. So
yeah.
Objectively better.
Well, maybe the girl in this maybe Allie Marie Evans kept that rancid shirt. So
maybe. Or just like cried into it when she saw the movie for the first time. Yeah, so that'll do it for Maximum Ride. This one was a stinker, but we tread on. Summer Surprise is in full swing. I will say we are deviating a little bit for the month of July because one of our loyal listeners gave us a great pun about over a year ago. We are looking at Jake Gyllenhaal. So next episode, we're looking at Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time from 2010. I got the full name this time, Trev. And you're welcome. And then Source Code from 2011. So we're doing that. And I'm looking. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it, but I'm definitely. You know what I'm looking forward to? Escaping YA.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm excited to take a break from this.
Yes. I at least think that those will be movies.
Well, I mean, like, that's the one nice thing you can say about Maximum Ride is suddenly, like, the next, like, everything's going to feel like an upswing for a while. Like, I'm thinking, like, I'm thinking back to The Seeker, The Dark is Rising, and being like, was I too harsh on that movie? I mean, that was a pretty good movie, I think, actually. I can't imagine, like, suddenly Surf Ninjas is going to seem like Citizen Kane after Maximum Ride. So.
Yeah. I'm looking at the slate all the way to the new year, and honestly, I'm excited. So yeah, that'll do it here. Follow us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. Like I said, Maximum Ride, 0 stars.
Letterboxd doesn't let you give 0 stars. You know that?
I know, but I just don't put the star in there, and usually I'll just write like 0 stars just for my own sake. And then also, I can't ever find it by looking at the star rating, so this will just get lost in the ether for me and in my
Which is what happened in the real world. So.
Exactly. Life imitates art. And then just join the tribe and hit that subscribe and come along this journey with us. And hopefully, we're going to enjoy Persia.